Okay, folks, so let's just recap. This function is going to be triggered every time we click on the button. And now we've got some additional steps in here. We need to create a new paragraph element, and then we need to add it to the page. So how can we start off creating a new paragraph element? Well, what we can do is we can go to the document object, which is this global object that we have access to. And then on here, we have another function that we can use called create element. And we invoke that and think about what we're going to pass in as an argument to create element. And it says here in VS Code, the document.createElement creates an instance of the element for this specified tag. And that gives us a clue as to what we're going to be putting in as an argument here. We're going to be putting in the tag name. So in this case, to create paragraph, we can scroll down and we have the option of using, here it comes, the letter P, okay, which is paragraph element here. We can even call that P element here like so. Awesome. Now then, what I recommend doing as you're going along, like what I'm doing is I'm adding a bit of code and then I'm going to just run that code or check to see what's happening in the browser each time I make a change, just so I get a little bit of feedback every time I'm moving forwards, so that it's easier to make sense of what the code is doing. So now if I click on add comment, I can see a P, I can see another P, see another P. So every time we click, this function is being executed and we're seeing a new P element being created every single time. Wonderful. So another thing we can do is we could say P element dot inner text, and we could set the inner text to just, for now, a string like hey, H-E-Y. This is just to check to see if we can see that inner text inside the P element as we move along. So now clicking again, I see hey, 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 lovely. So I'm seeing a paragraph element with the inner text H-E-Y being created every single time we click on the button. Wonderful. So what next after that? So after we've got the element created, the thing that we need to remember to do is actually to add this new P element to the document itself. So looking at our document, we see that in our HTML file, we have our head element, we have our body element, where all of the elements in here are going to be rendered in the page. So it even says here, the body element represents the content of the document. So what I want to say now is go to the body here and add a paragraph element into the body. It doesn't necessarily need to be the body, but I'm just going to do it here for the sake of simplicity so we can see how this works. So the first thing we need to do is access the body. So document.body. Cool. And then we need to think about how we add the P element here to the body. So for this, we can appeal to another method. In this case, we're going to use a function called append child. We invoke that. And indeed, we might have some documentation on this if we look in here, back to javascript.info. I can't really find anything in here, so we don't need to worry about that for the time being. But essentially, the paragraph element is going to be added to the bottom of the body element in here. So as an argument, you need to pass in an element like so. Cool. Now, I'm going to take away this log so it doesn't get cluttered. And then we're going to see what happens when we run this in here. So we click add comment, add comment, add comment, add comment. So I'm not seeing anything in the console now because I'm not doing any console logs in here. However, if I scroll down in the actual page itself, you can see in here each time we're seeing the text H-E-Y appear. And this is because every time we click, this function is run, we create a new P element, we set its inner text, and we append that P element to the body. And if we just inspect with here like so, we can see a P element, P element, P element, and another paragraph element as well down here. Wonderful. So then, there is one final piece missing here that we need to finish off. So we have accessed our button. Sorry, we have accessed our button here, and then we've attached an event handler here. Cool. But now what we want to do is we want to ensure that if we type in comment out of ourselves here and click add comment, we want this text to appear on the screen and not just the text HEY. So how can we do that? Well, for this, we're going to need to access the text that's inside of this input element here. So heading back to the index.html, heading back to input here, we have an input element with an ID of comment. So what I'm going to do now is target that input element. So I can actually do this outside up here. I could say input element. In fact, we can do this, sorry, down here. Once input element. We can do document dot query selector, and then we can do hashtag comment. Cool. And then we're just going to console log input element. Awesome. So now I want you to think carefully about what is going to happen when we run this. So this function is going to get executed when we click. What are we going to see in here? Well, hopefully, what we're going to see appearing in our log is this element here. So let's click. And indeed, whenever we click now, we're seeing the input element like so. Let's type some text into here. Cool. Now we can't see the text that we've typed in and inputted here. So there is a way that we can access that within the input element. How can we do that? Well, what we can do is we can use something called the value property of the element. And let's just check to see what this looks like when we run this code over here. I'm just going to move this comment up here. Okay, let's have a look and see what that looks like. Add comment. Cool. Add comment again. Cool. And every single time I click on the button, that callback function here gets executed, and we're seeing a log of the input element and its value property in here. So the final thing to take away from in here is that now we need to update and change the HEY string. Instead of setting the key elements in a text to just HEY, I want you to think about what we're going to be putting here instead. Well, we have input element.value, and this is the value of the text inside of the input box. So now we can just put that down here as well. So input element.value. So let's get rid of this here. Cool. And then we can just even add in a comment here. Set the inner text to be the input's value. Cool. So I love kid A is my comment. If I click, voila, I have that comment added to the page. If I do hail to the thief, not so sure about hail to the thief. Whoops, and add comment again. And I get that comment added to the page as well. And every single time it's going to use the value inside of that input box. Cool. So it's worth noting that I'm adding these comments in here just so I can illustrate to you the different steps. However, when you're writing the code yourself, you shouldn't be going about adding in loads of comments because the developers will know what you're doing. So afterwards, I'm just going to take out these comments like so we can see exactly what the code looks like without all those comments. And so this is the code that we have left like so. Awesome. Okay, so in summary, we have some logic here that says when the user clicks on the button, the function is going to run, going to create our new P element, and then we're going to use the value of the input and set that to be the inner text of the new P element and then add that to the document. Awesome. So we're going to pause there and let you get on with some practice. Thank you, folks.